So the last class I did was on the Ahab and Jezebel and Elijah. And so I'm going to continue on with that theme and take a look at the life and times of the prophet Elisha. Elijah obviously plays a very important part in the history of Israel, the interactions between the wicked king Ahab and Elijah, the trials and tribulations of Elijah. He was brought very, very low because of the persecutions by Jezebel. And it seemed like all of Israel was turning towards Baal. And that was really the big fight with Elijah, keeping the children of Israel focused on Yahweh, on the God of Israel. But they were worshiping other gods. They were being drawn away from other gods. And Israel was slowly losing its identity and its culture and its relationship with God. And Elijah obviously was very concerned about that. And he was very bold and courageous in really meeting Ahab face to face a lot of times and ripping into him, telling him, like, this is what's going to happen. This is what you're doing. Jezebel had a different attitude towards Elijah. Ahab had a different relationship with Elijah as well. Jezebel just wanted to wipe him out, get rid of him, and she tried, a lot to do that. Here is a map very quickly of Israel and Judah. You can take a look up at the map. I just want to draw your attention up to the, here we go, Phil, watch this. Woo! Oh, yeah. This is the year I just want to draw your attention to. This country called Aram. It is modern-day Syria. We get the term Aramaic from this area. This was the language that they spoke, Aramaic. And that language is going to be what is going to be spoken by Israel for a very long period of time. In fact, that's the language that Israel, the Jews, were speaking during the time of Jesus. So that shows kind of some of the influence that is going on during this time from, outside. Hebrew is almost going to be lost at this time because everybody is speaking Aramaic. What kept Hebrew going was the temple and the Levites. That was kind of the language, kind of like the Catholic Church in Latin. The religious Jews in the temple, they are going to, everything is going to be in Hebrew. And eventually, even when the Jews come back into Israel in 1948, there was a big problem with that too, because a lot of them did not speak Hebrew at all. And so that culture, the culture and the religion and the language are all kind of tied in together. And so Israel is where we're going to kind of focus our story today, because Elijah is going to depart, as we're going to see, in a kind of miraculous way. And Elisha, he's like a nobody. No one like Elisha, who, we're introduced to, with the story of Elijah kind of coming up and say, hey, you're going to be the next prophet. And he's like, okay, I guess so. So, all right. Okay, historical context of this. The divided kingdom, northern kingdom, Israel is in spiritual crisis like we talked about. The majority of the people, so a couple things. Number one, the sin of Jeroboam is still going on. What was the sin of Jeroboam? Well, he set up his own temple, his own altars, one up in Dan, one down in Bethel, and he put like the base non-Levites into positions of authority and religious power. And so he had his own religion going on. They still worshiped Yahweh, but in their own terms. Sound familiar? Okay. And the representation of Yahweh was a bull. And that kind of goes back to Egypt as well. Remember, what was the thing that they served? The golden calf, right? Same type of thing is going on. They kept, and it expanded. So you have that. You have the worship of Yahweh in a different way that was not approved by God, number one. And then number two, you also have other individuals following after other gods like Baal, Ashtaroth, Molech, all of these other gods, Dagon down in the Philistines. these were all gods that required the offering up as sacrifices of children. Okay, these things were one of the reasons why he was so adamant. You got to get these people out of here. They're going to do nothing but drag you down. And we see that in our readings, right, with Judges, in Judges. We're going to read Judges chapter 2 for our exhortation. And this ties in exactly with the stuff that is going on. They're still dealing with this. They're still dealing with people that are trying to draw them away from the things of God. Okay? Spiritual crisis. And in times of spiritual crisis, God in his mercy has always brought somebody to the forefront to speak on his behalf. And that first person obviously was Elijah, and he's going to pass that along to Elisha. Baal worship promoted by King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. We know this from Scripture. And in fact, Jehu is going to say these famous words, I think Jezebel has, or Ahab has worshipped Baal a little. Jehu will worship him a lot, right? And this was kind of one of his ways to get all of the priests of Baal together in the temple, and then there's going to be a great slaughter. We'll look at that a little later. Okay, so Elijah's ministry is going to end. Elisha continues the fight against idolatry, but it's going to be different. And I think it's interesting to look at this. Elijah, to me anyways, is kind of a solitary figure, right? He's on his own. He's battling with Ahab and Jezebel, but he's kind of a recluse. And in fact, he isolated himself because he's being chased down to be killed, and that was what caused him a lot of spiritual and mental anguish, right? Because he was by himself, and he says, God, just let me die. I'm no better than my fathers, right? He was really depressed, and he couldn't see any way out. And, God gave, through his angels, God gave him some food and everything and stuff like that. That's actually pretty interesting, too. Sometimes in our minds, we can kind of, get depressed, looking at things, kind of dealing with everyday things, you're just like down. And it's like, well, when's the last time you had a nice meal? What's your blood sugar situation? And so with Elijah, he needed comfort. And God gave him that comfort through his angels, and that's what he needed. And that still small voice, right? Remember that? It's so great, that interaction with God and Elijah. Elijah wasn't seeing things correctly. The still small voice of God. And we have to be listening to that, right? It's always there. The voice of God is always there. We need to be listening. Okay. Here are the list of kings that Elisha's ministry is going to deal with. Joram or Jehoram. Jehu, he's going to play an important part. There's going to be kind of a reformation during his reign, but it's not going to be great, right? He's going to be doing his own thing too. Jehoahaz and Joash. So what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4 kings. Pretty significant period of time that Elisha is going to deal with. We're going to see in his ministry, he's much more active with people. He's interacting with people on a different level than I believe that Elijah was. Elisha is going to be with the sons of the prophets. He's going to be, there when they're kind of building a new site for the prophets, that type of thing. And he's going to help them, kind of build a community. He was like a community guy. And there's a place for both Elijah and Elisha's in ecclesial life and in our lives. We all know people that kind of like their privacy and interact on a limited basis. We know people that, love to interact, right? They love the jibber-jab, as I like to say. And so there's a place for all of them. It's kind of like John the Baptist, right? John the Baptist was in the wilderness. Jesus says, what did you go out to see? A reed shaking in the wind? John the Baptist, he was wearing, camel's hair. He's kind of a wild man, kind of outside society, as opposed to Jesus. Where was Jesus? He was right in the middle of it, right? Crowds of people touching him constantly. He's always on with the people. And there's a place for both of those things. All right. So constant threats from the north. Aram, which is modern day Syria, very powerful. Okay, powerful group of people up there. You have the Syrians and the Assyrians. They're two different types of people. So Aram is Syria right next to, in the north, right next to northern Israel. Ben-Hadad, that should be a name that's familiar to you. Okay, caused a lot of trouble for northern Israel. Caused a lot of trouble for Israel, period. And Hazael as well. Two very powerful kings that are going to cause a lot of destruction in Israel. Because, there was, with Ahab, Ahab's an interesting character, but, he didn't really keep the military force up to what it was. I think he was mocked one time by Ben-Hadad. He said, I will give you 7,000 horses if you can put riders on them. In other words, Ben-Hadad's laughing at Ahab, saying, you don't even have the men to put on these horses to fight me. You're nothing. And then, the story, he's drinking himself drunk inside the pavilion, and, boom, it all comes crashing down on him. So, all right. It's a pretty interesting picture I like this picture where Jezebel is kind of taking the lead in worship here, right, to Baal. And Ahab's like, yeah, that's great, good job. So, all right. Okay, so Elisha is going to minister in Israel for a period of 60 or 70 years. That's a long time. It's a long time of interacting with people, interacting politically with both the kings of Aram and the kings of Israel. So that, both Elijah and Elisha were well-respected people in Israel, but also outside of Israel as well. In fact, Elisha is going to be accused of telling the king of Israel what the king of Syria said in his bed, right? And so that they were trying to get Elisha as well, because Elisha kept on telling the king, I think it was Jehoram, that, hey, they're trying to kill you. They're going to have an ambush here. And so Elisha kept on telling all of the secrets of the government to the king, which is interesting. Okay, this is one of Israel's darkest periods. A lot of struggle, a lot of sadness, the invasions constantly. We're going to see that as well. The raiders from the north are going to come down and take spoil, whatever they wanted to, at whatever time. Okay, so Elisha's calling in succession from Elijah, son of Shaphat. He was from a prosperous farming family. Now, how do we know that? How do we know that he was from a prosperous farming family? Bold statement, Brother Rich. Okay, let's look at the next little blurb here. Plowing with 12 yoke of oxen. Okay, it's 24 oxen that he's plowing with. All right, so you have to have some type of substance in order to have 24 oxen. And if you're 12 yoke of oxen, you're plowing a pretty significant area of land. Okay, so that's kind of an insight into why they say he's a prosperous farming family. He had 24 oxen that he was using to plow. Most people in Israel would have maybe one oxen to do a lot of the work. This family has 24. And so we find Elisha doing work on the farm. He was working. He wasn't sitting around. He was active. I wonder how long it takes to, how long it would take to kind of plow with oxen, that type of thing. Taking care of oxen. It wasn't controlling oxen. We go up to the Freiburg Fair occasionally, and some of these oxen are massive. And I can just imagine kind of working with these animals. They're like 6 feet. They're like 6 feet tall. They were taller than me. They're massive animals. But I guess it's like anything else. When the animal's little, you kind of train it that way. And we saw that as well, like little kids kind of training little calves to like pay attention, that type of thing. But anyways, what is he going to do with the oxen? Well, he's going to offer the oxen as sacrifices. Let's take a look at this in 1 Kings 19. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, in verse 19. So he departed, speaking of Elijah, thence and found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen before him, and he with the 12. And Elijah passed by him and cast his mantle upon him. So I believe Elisha was, he probably had servants with him, and so they're plowing along. Everyone had a yoke of oxen and they're plowing. So 12 plows, 12 yoke of oxen, and it says that Elisha was with the 12th. He was with the last one. So this is a major operation. Okay, it's kind of like some of these massive farms out in the Midwest, thousands and thousands of acres, and they have, millions of dollars worth of machinery to do all the plowing and the fertilizing and the reaping. Some of these combines, these massive combines, incredible what they can do. It's all on GPS now. Back in the day, you really had to put your back into farming. Now you just kind of sit in an air-conditioned thing and hit a button, right? Not bad. This was not the case with Elisha. He's working pretty hard, okay? But it's interesting. There's going to be, kind of like a physical, you're going to see the oxen killed, all of the plow implements are going to be burned as a sacrifice to make the fire to burn the oxen on. So this really, with Elisha, he is putting away his old life. He's putting his old life in the past, destroying his old life, and he's following Elijah. That takes a lot of faith. It takes a lot of courage to do something like that. To leave a relatively prosperous farm, a prosperous life. I'm sure Elisha had all of the comforts that a prosperous, farmer would have. But he gave it all up. And so continuing on, and he left the oxen and ran after Elijah. Oh yeah, and it says, yoke of oxen, he was with the 12th, and Elijah passed by him and cast his mantle on him. Interesting, puts his mantle on him. And he left the oxen and ran after Elijah and said, let me, I pray thee, kiss my father and my mother, and then I will follow thee. And he said unto him, go back again, for what have I done to thee? And he returned back from him and took a yoke of oxen and slew them and boiled their flesh with the instruments of the oxen and gave unto the people, and they did eat. Then he arose and went with Elijah and ministered unto him. So it's he's putting his old self away. Okay, they have a little ceremony here where they kill 2 of the oxen, use some of the wood from the plowing instruments to create the fire. He gives kind of like a going away party, I guess. I don't know. But the idea of a mantle, there's other scriptures that talk about that too, like Samuel's mantle, right? When Saul kind of grabbed it, what happened? It ripped. He tried to grab it, it ripped. I think that happened too in another case. I can't remember, but with Israel and Judah before there was a split about tearing the kingdom in two, that type of thing. So this idea of the covering, right? He covers Elisha with it, kind of passing on the ministry and the power of Elijah to Elisha. Okay, he is going to request a double portion of Elijah's spirit. Okay, and this kind of reminds us of a firstborn inheritance. Remember, like with the firstborn, he got a double portion in Jewish society, in the ancient Jewish society. The firstborn got a double portion. If Jason was here, I'd remind him of that, but he's not. And so Elisha's name means God is salvation, and we're going to see that. In fact, that is exactly what is going to happen in small little ways, brothers and sisters. He is going to help the people of God. A lot of Elisha's miracles, not all of them, but a lot of them are kind of like little miracles, the small little miracles that are going to help the believers, the sons of the prophets, the families of the prophets as well. He's always helping them. So we'll look at that as well. This is a pretty cool painting right here. I'm not sure, but you have Elijah here, covering him with the mantle. You have the yokes of oxen here. It's kind of, in a lot of ways, it's kind of an obscure story. A lot of people don't know it, but, you know, they made a picture of it. It's pretty cool, a painting. Okay. All right. Elijah is going to be taken up, right? Let's take a look at 2 Kings 2. Yeah, so so Elisha, as he's being taken up, Elijah takes the mantle. Okay, the mantle is left. He is taken up, Elijah, in a chariot of fire. It's interesting that Elijah is going to be one of the individuals at the Transfiguration, right? Moses and Elijah are going to be there. He has the mantle now, okay? He's going to use it to cross the Jordan on dry ground. So that's going to be like the first miracle. He's going to use the mantle to cross over the Jordan. Chariots of fire and horses of fire. Elijah is taken up into a whirlwind, and the only thing left is his mantle, and that's what Elijah has. Elisha has. Elisha has Elijah's mantle. It is a physical representation of God's power, of the ministry, of God saying to Elisha, "You are now my prophet. You are now my mouthpiece. You have a double portion of my power." Okay. Elisha sees this is going to be pretty dramatic, right? You're just kind of hanging out. Boom, there's a whirlwind of fire. Elisha is taken up in a chariot of fire. And he says, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel. Well, just keep that in mind, too, because there's going to be another reference of that as well. You know, the protecting power of God. The unseen protection of God. That Elisha knows is there. And is also going to show his own servant as well. So picks up Elijah's cloak, strikes the Jordan, the waters part. And after this, sons of the prophets recognize God's spirit now rests upon Elisha. He's the guy. He's the prophet of God now. He is the mouthpiece of God. They recognize it and they follow him. Something interesting right here in this picture, right? Here goes Elijah. Here's the mantle, and here's Elisha. So, you know, if you notice right here, bald spot. It's a bald spot. Okay, just keep that in mind. Butchie, you'll get revenge. Don't worry. All right, not pointing out anybody. Okay. All right, you got a little bald spot there. All right. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about, like small little miracles, but they're important, okay? He establishes his authority by doing miracles. Let's take a look. 2 Kings 2, should be there already, in the 19th verse. And the men of the city said unto Elisha, Behold, I pray thee, the situation of this city is pleasant, as my Lord sees, but the water is not, and the ground barren. And he said, Bring me a new cruse, and put salt therein. And they brought it to him. And he went forth unto the spring of the waters, and cast the salt in there, and said, Thus saith the Lord, I have healed these waters. There shall not be from thence any more death or barren land. So the waters were healed unto this day, according to the saying of Elisha, which he spake. Okay. So he parts both. His first two miracles have to do with water, right? Parts the Jordan with the mantle, and now he heals the water. It was, the Jericho, the waters had been contaminated for whatever reason, and so Elisha is going to heal those waters. Now they have a drinking supply. Now they can water their fields and their crops, so the land isn't going to be. Okay. All right, Butchie, this is what I'm talking about right here. Judgment on mocking youth, the two bears, okay? This is also in 2 Kings, the 2nd chapter, 23. And he went up from thence unto Bethel,
And as he was going up from the way, there came forth youths, it says little children, out of the city, and mocked him, and said unto him, Go up, thou bald head. Go up, thou bald head. And he turned back and looked at them, and cursed them in the name of the Lord. And there came forth 2 she-bears out of the wood, and tare 42 children of them. Okay, so listen, it sounds, first of all, this is kind of a very interesting story. Like, was this an overreaction on Elisha's part? Well, we're just given this information, that there were a group of youths who were harassing Elisha. If they were harassing Elisha, most likely they were harassing other people as well. So it could have been like a gang, youths or something like that. And so, unfortunately, the judgment is they're going to die by a bear attack. Not a great way to go, but again, it just shows they were not showing reverence to Elisha. They weren't showing reverence to God. It sounds like this area was an area that was kind of lawless in a certain way. And, you have this group of youths, kind of like a gang of people causing major problems. They weren't controlled. So we're not giving all of the information. There's some writers, Jewish writers, that kind of, talk about this, that it wasn't just, it wasn't little children, just like innocent kids. They were like teenage kids or young adults who were causing major problems in this area and affecting all of the people around them. It wasn't just Elisha that that they were dealing with, calling him bald head. That was like the least of their problems. All right. In 2 Kings 4, verse 1 through 7, a woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets. Here is Elisha again, kind of in the mix, the daily mix of life with the sons of the prophets. Thy servant, my husband, is dead, and thou knowest that thy servant did fear the Lord. And the creditor is come to take unto him my 2 sons to be slaves. All right, so we get a little insight into some of the daily struggles of everyday Israelites, particularly widows. This is why God in the law, you were always to remember and to treat with kindness the fatherless and the widow. Well, guess what? We got a twofer here. We have the fatherless, the 2 boys didn't have a father. He died. He was a good son. He was a good son of the prophets, right? He recognized that. But this widow had nothing. And so the father died owing somebody money, okay? Guess what? Where does the debt go? Oh, guess what? The widow now has to pay the debt. I have no job. Doesn't matter. You got 2 kids, they're my slaves now, okay? They're gonna work off your debt. That's the way it went. That's the way it went. And so, this woman is distraught, rightfully so. Okay, let's go on. And Elisha said unto her, What shall I do for thee? Tell me, what hast thou in the house? Okay, I'll help you out. What do you need? And she said, Thine handmaid hath not anything in the house, save a pot of oil. Okay, shows how desperate she is right now. She's got a pot of oil, little bit of oil for cooking, right? It's going to cook a little meal, whatever it is, okay? Maybe for some, anointing yourself, that type of thing. They would use oil and perfumes, sometimes put it in your hair, that type of thing, make you smell good, so on and so forth. So anyways, this is all she has in the house. Then he said, Go borrow thee vessels abroad of all thy neighbors, even empty vessels. Borrow as many as you can. So this widow's like, okay, well, we'll see where this goes. I don't know what's going on. I got a little pot of oil. You want me to get more pots? Okay. And when thou art come in, thou shalt shut the door upon thee and upon thy sons, and shalt pour out into all these vessels, and thou shalt set aside that which is full. Okay. This seems like an extraordinary request. And I think it took a certain amount of faith on this widow's part to say, okay, Elisha, sounds a little weird, but I'm going to give it a shot. Okay, she had faith that something good was going to come out of this. We're going to look at Naaman, right? When Naaman is told what to do, he's like, get out of here. No way is that going to happen. All right? Okay. And it came, so she went from him and shut the door upon her and upon her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured it out. It's interesting, right? It's kind of reminds me of kind of growing up. If there was something to do, my mother would go, "All right, Richard, go to the store." It's like the widow is saying, "Go get as many vessels as possible," and the two boys are like carrying all kinds of vessels, right? So they got dozens and dozens of vessels inside the home. Okay, and it came to pass when the vessels were full, that she said unto her son, "Bring me yet a vessel." And he said unto her, "There's no more vessels." And the oil stayed. So unlimited oil from this little pot of oil, okay? Reminds me of the loaves and the fishes. That Jesus, the miracle of Jesus, did it twice, okay? He took a little and made a great abundance, okay? Elisha took a little bit of oil, just a little bit. Massive amounts of oil. Filled all of the vessels. We're not told how many vessels were there, but I bet it was a lot of vessels. Okay? Then she came and told the man of God, and he said, "Go, sell the oil, pay the debt, and live thou and thy children of the rest." So this was, oil was, I wouldn't say it was expensive, but oftentimes it was hard to get, okay? Particularly for poor people, And so she had an abundance. She had all these vessels of oil to the point where she could pay off the debt and live off the rest, okay? Very small little miracle, okay? Like using everyday things. But Elisha saves the life of these two boys, saves this little family, the widow and the fatherless boys. He saves them from a very difficult, awful situation, okay? Not great, not grandiose, very small, but very effective, right? And I look at our lives like that too, brothers and sisters. When we're put in a position to help on a very small way, help someone else who is struggling, suffering, that type of thing, do we do it with the same enthusiasm? What do you need? That Elisha says. What do you need? He says. I'll help you. Okay, that's our attitude, even in small little things, just like Elisha did. Where's the time going? Goodness. All right. I like to call these miracles of life and provision, right? Small little miracles that affect the lives and the provision of people. Now, here's a big one, though, okay? The Shunammite woman's son from the dead. Remember, she was barren, and finally in her old age she has a son, but then he got like heat stroke or something happened, and he died. And so the widow is beside herself, obviously, and Elisha comes and raises the son from the dead. Okay? Here's an interesting one. Purifies poison stew. Oh, whoop-de-doo, right? Well, this was their food supply. Their food supply was poisoned in some way. They might have, someone in kind of gathering things might have put like the wrong vegetable in there that was poisonous. Like accidentally put some hemlock in there or something. I don't know. And now it's poison. We got a problem. So let's look at this. In 2 Kings 4 and 38, and Elisha came to Gilgal, and there was a dearth in the land. Okay, so we have a famine. So that should tell you right now that they're scavenging for anything. Okay, any type of food that is even considered edible is going into the pot. And there was a dearth in the land, and the sons of the prophets were sitting before him, and he said unto his servant, "Set on the great pot and seethe pottage for the sons of the prophets." And one went out into the field to gather herbs, and found a wild vine, and gathered thereof wild gourds, his lap full, and came and shred them into the pot of porridge, for they knew them not. They didn't really know what they were putting in, but they were starving. They were hungry, and it's like, oh, here's some like squash thing or something. Oh, okay, cut it up, put it into the pot, the porridge pot. Okay. And they poured out for the men to eat. And it came to pass that as they were eating the porridge, that they cried out and said, "O thou man of God, there is death in the pot." and they could not eat thereof. So there was something poisonous in the stew, accidentally, right? But he said, then bring meal, and he cast it into the pot, and he said, pour out for the people that they may eat. And there was no harm in the pot. So, whatever was in this pot of stew, he inoculated it, okay? And now they could eat. They benefited from this, and again, a very small level. It's kind of like, well, Elisha, what was the miracle you did today? Well, I took away a poison stew. Oh, that's nothing. You know what I'm saying? It's interesting to me that these miracles are listed, but they're very small miracles. But it helped to continue the sons of the prophets. They got nourishment from that. Another day of nourishment to continue on. Oh, here's another one too that kind of reminds me of Jesus, right? He's going to feed 100 men with 20 loaves. And there's another one, making an iron head float. Let's take a look at that in 2 Kings 6. And the sons of the prophets said unto Elisha, behold now, the place where we dwell with thee is too strait for us. It's getting overcrowded. We need to find another place. Let us go, we pray thee, unto Jordan, and take thence every man a beam, and let us make us a place there where we may dwell. And he answered, go. And one said, be content, I pray thee, and go with thy servants. Elisha said, okay, I'll go. And he said unto them, so we went with them. And when they came to Jordan, they cut down wood. But as one was felling a beam, the axe head fell into the water. And he cried and said, alas, master, for it was borrowed. And the man of God said, where did it fall? And he showed him the place. And he cut down a stick and cast it in thither, and the iron did swim. Therefore he said, take it up to thee. And he put out his hand, and he took it. Okay? Another small little miracle. But it helped out the people, right? It was a borrowed axe. Axes were very, just think about all the kind of the man hours that went into making that axe, an iron axe, right? Blacksmithing, all that kind of stuff. It was a borrow too. And if you don't return a borrow, now you owe a lot of money for this axe. Okay? But Elisha, again, on a very small level, helps this person out and helps out the sons of the prophets to build another little settlement. Okay? Small miracles, but they have a great impact upon this small group of believers, the sons of the prophets. Okay? All right. What do we got here? Okay. Yeah, the healing of Naaman. It's interesting in this story, brothers and sisters, that Naaman learned about Elisha from an Israelite slave girl that was taken by Syrian raiders. Okay, this poor little girl was taken from her family forcibly and then sold at the slave markets up in Syria, most likely in Damascus. And Naaman, takes her as a servant to his wife. And so that's interesting. God is using a very bad situation to bring about His glory. Okay, the healing of Naaman, right? And Naaman, he's looking down at the Jordan River, and he says, this is garbage river. There's so many better up in Syria. Why wouldn't I do that? So Naaman, he was the commander of the host of the Syrians. Okay? He was a prideful guy in a lot of ways, but he had leprosy. Imagine leprosy. That can be a tricky situation, can't it? Because people don't want to be around you. Because it's contagious. They were outsiders, but here you have a commander of the armies of Syria that has leprosy. He eventually humbles himself, and he's cleansed. He's cleansed in the Jordan of his leprosy. He dips 7 times, and he comes out, and it says that his skin was white as snow. It was perfect, beautiful skin. The leprosy was all gone. All right. And he says, this is what he says, now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel. And in fact, he asked pardon from Elisha and from God. He says, when I go with my master into the house of his gods, pardon me. I'm not worshiping. I know he's nothing. I believe in Yahweh, the God of Israel. Gehazi, unfortunately, Elisha's servant is going to get greedy, and he's going to, because Naaman is going to offer him all kinds of stuff. And Elisha's like, nah, I don't need any of that. But then Gehazi goes and tells this story. Oh, we just had some of the sons of the prophets. They're coming. We could use some clothes. We could use some money, right? And he's taking it all for himself, so he lies. Guess what? Leprosy goes on him, right? So greed, lies, that type of thing. Those are things that God does, obviously, we're commanded not to do those things. We're not to be greedy. We're not to be prideful. Certainly not to lie as well. Okay. We're running out of time here. But anyways, Elisha is going to be pretty involved in the politics, in the military operations of this time. Okay? Elisha in the Aramean wars, he's going to warn the king of Israel of the Syrian ambushes, kind of like divine intelligence, right? He had all the intel, and he was telling Israel exactly what the kings of Syria were going to do before they even did it. The Syrian army is going to surround Dothan to capture Elisha. They were tired of it. They're like, oh, we're tired of this guy telling the king what we're up to. And so his servant was very afraid. And Elisha says, do not be afraid. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And so Elisha prays that the servant's eyes would be opened. And his servant's eye would be opened, and the whole sky is full of the chariots and the horsemen of God. And I think that's an exhortation for us as well. We have divine beings right now in this hall watching over us. We all have guardian angels that are watching over us. God sees us. Even though we may not see these angels, even though obviously we don't see God, we know He is there. We know His presence is there. We need to trust in that. And so we have to open up our spiritual eyes to those things. And that's why obviously it's important to come to meeting, to be reminded of these things, to have daily contact with God through His Word, through prayer, through meditation. All of these things are so important for our eyes to be open to the spiritual things. There's a whole other realm up there. And the majority of the people, their eyes are closed to it, like this servant. And so that's a great prayer for us to ask, right? Lord, open our eyes that we may see. Right? Simple, but very effective. Okay. All right, let's do this. This is the last thing we're going to do. Let's look at the final in 2 Kings 13. Yeah, this is actually a pretty cool story. 14, verse 14, 13th chapter, 2 Kings. Now Elisha was sick of his sickness, whereof he died. And Joash, the king of Israel, came down unto him and wept over his face and said, O my father, the chariot of Israel and the horsemen thereof. And so, Joash, even though he wasn't a great king, he was actually, he did his own thing, didn't follow after God great. He had his moments. He obviously loved Elisha, and there was a relationship there, right? Elisha's mind is someplace else, though. Elisha is not focused on his own sickness. That's not how he operated. Elisha said unto him, take bows and arrows. And he took unto him bows and arrows. And he said to the king of Israel, put thine hand upon the bow. And he put his hand upon it. And Elisha put his hands upon the king's hands. Do I have a picture of this someplace? Oh yeah, here it is, right here. Okay? And he said to put thine hand on the bow, and he put his hand upon it, and Elisha put his hand upon the king's hands, and he said, open the window eastward. And he opened it. Then Elisha said, shoot. And he shot. And he said, the arrow of the Lord's deliverance, and the arrow of deliverance from Syria. For thou shalt smite the Assyrians in Aphek till thou hast consumed them. And he said, take the arrows, and he took them. And he said unto the king of Israel, smite upon the ground. And he smote 3 times and stopped. And the man of God was angry with him and said, you should have smitten 5 or 6 times till thou hast smitten Syria, till thou hast consumed it. Whereas now thou will only smite Syria 3 times. You know, if I was Joash, I would be like, hey, why don't you give me this information before? I would have smote 12 times, no problem. So interesting way. This is kind of the last event of Elisha. You know, very interesting ministry, right? Very small miracles. He spent a lot of times with the sons of the prophets, but he was also heavily involved in the politics of this time, protecting the king of Israel from the shenanigans of the king of Syria. And he actually is going to anoint Hazael. Hazael was not an Israelite king. He was a Syrian king. So I just found that interactions very interesting. All right, we'll stop there. We're running out of time. Questions, comments for me?